I'm currently recording this, and there's a raging thunderstorm outside, so if you hear the occasional low rumble, it's not you. It's the fact that my microphone's picking up thunder outside. And I do want to bring up, to kind of acknowledge the elephant sitting in the back of the room for this particular episode, eating tea and crumpets and waving at me condescendingly. This is probably a non-issue. What I'm talking about will probably never come to fruition. We're talking about paintball in the Olympics, and it's been my experience that all parties involved talk about it, but nobody's willing to do what it takes to get on the world stage. Nobody wants to make the sacrifices. Nobody wants to go through the hoops. Nobody wants to be held accountable. So that's kind of why I say this is a non-issue. It could be an issue. I would be very, very shocked and surprised, and I would actually be the first one behind this if the industry decided, yes, this is where we need to go. I would love this. But the truth of the matter is, they're not going to do it. So this might be an entire non-issue. So, who knows? I also want to state, because people tend to get their underwear in a bunch on videos like this is my opinion. I'm going to attempt to back it up with facts. I'm going to attempt to back it up with other information that I can, without trying to edit out things. That's my goal. If you disagree with me, make a response video to this. I will approve it, regardless if it agrees with me or not. Because the whole idea of getting discussion going is to hear other people's opinions and work something out and try to figure out where everything lies, where the best solution is. So that's what that's the goal here. Alright, all that said, let's talk about paintball in the Olympics. When I bring up paintball in the Olympics, it's like every 4 years people start saying, oh, it would be really cool if we could put paintball in the Olympics. Matter of fact, this video in particular is because somebody sent me a link to a YouTube video where they're trying to get an e-petition that they're going to send to the IOC to make the IOC take paintball seriously. Well, first of all, e-petitions aren't worth the paper they're written on. And second of all, I don't think anybody's actually looked to see what it takes to be an Olympic sport. I have. I've also seen a lot of people who are saying that paintball will never be an Olympic sport because of politics. And what they cited was, can you imagine two countries that are at war with each other on a paintball field shooting guns at each other? That won't end well. Well, anytime you have a team sport where you have two countries that are at each other's throat in the real world, yeah, it gets pretty nasty. Watch some of the team sports from the coverage of this year's Olympics. You'll see exactly what I'm talking about. But the reason paintball is not going to be considered an Olympic sport anytime soon has nothing to do with politics. Has nothing to do with a liberal or conservative agenda. It's because of bookkeeping. Let me explain. First of all, we have to talk about what makes a sport an Olympic sport. If you go to the Olympic website, olympic.org/sports, they have a PDF file on their website that has all of this information in it. But for the sake of brevity, I will just quote the important bits here. So, what makes a sport Olympic? To quote, to make it onto the Olympic program, a sport first has to be recognized. It must be administered by an international federation which ensures that the sport's activities follow the Olympic Charter. If it's widely practiced around the world and meets a number of criteria established by the IOC session, a recognized sport may be added to the Olympic program on the recommendation of the IOC's Olympic Program Commission. Let's break this down into its basic components. First of all, recognized sports. Again, olympic.org, on the PDF file, they actually break the entire thing down. First things first, an international federation. For a sport to be made an Olympic sport, it has to be governed by an international federation recognized by the IOC. Examples, swimming in the games is governed by the International Swimming Federation, or FINA, skating by the International Skating Union, the ISU, etc. It breaks down into disciplines and events as well, but the basic translation, to just boil it down, paintball has to have an international federation that is recognized by the IOC as the international federation for that sport before they're even going to consider paintball as an Olympic event. And when you look around the world, there's already an alphabet soup of leagues out there. You've got at least 3 or 4 in the states that I'm aware of on a national level. That's not to mention the smaller levels within states. You go abroad, every country has their own international thing going, and nobody has a standardized rule set. There's no standardization here. There is no international committee for paintball. I would personally welcome it, because then we're all playing the same game. We're all truly playing the same game, and right now we are not. Every country has their own home rules, essentially. They might all be based on one rule set, but they modify them just slightly in every country. You don't see that happening with basketball. You don't see that happening with 100-meter swimming, anything like that. Now, something else that's been in that PDF. The criteria for being an Olympic sport, and I'm reading this directly. In order to be included on the Olympic program, a summer sport must fulfill, amongst others, the following conditions. It must be widely practiced by men in 75 countries on 4 continents and by women in 40 countries on 3 continents. The World Anti-Doping Code must be applied, and it must not rely on mechanical propulsion such as a motor. Again, we're going to break this one down. As I know it right now, paintball is played in several countries. And I know that in some countries there's been some controversy because they think that paintball players are a bunch of militant guys, and they see people wearing camouflage, holding guns, and they freak out. I know there was that whole Germany incident some time ago. But I would, honestly right now, I would be hard-pressed to name 75 countries that could field a 5-man team. There is roughly 196 countries in the world, so about 50% of the world would have to be able to field a national team in order to be an Olympic sport. Plus, we'd have to make a women's league, unless you could sell paintball as a mixed-gender sport. And there are mixed-gendered sports in the Olympics. 5 of them. Sailing, equestrian, skating, luge, and badminton. There's one for you. So this would mean that we need to get more women into the sport so that we could have some more of a demographic. And, yeah, considering the attitude I've seen from some men who play this sport, I would be surprised to see more women playing right now. I would welcome it, don't get me wrong, but I don't see it happening. I don't see the guy... It's a guy's club. We know this. And a lot of women just kind of, they look at it and they go, why would I want to involve myself in that? Good or not. I'm going to be taking up a huge chunk here talking about the WDR code. Because this, to me, this is a pet peeve of mine about paintball. Because this is the one thing that we could do. It would be moderately expensive, but we could institute this right now. Let's start with what the WDR code is. Go to wada-ama.org, or you can just do a search on WADA, World Anti-Doping Program. Now, the WDR code is a 135-page document. It has all the procedures, banned substances, and all that in the document. Go check it out for yourselves. Bring a lunch. It's a long, painful thing to read through, but it's important to know. It's important to know what's prohibited on their list. Prohibited things include, well, among other things, insulins, some diuretics like ephedrine. They ban blood doping. They ban stimulants like adrenaline. They ban narcotics, cannabinoids, and genetic manipulation. I'm not even joking. That's actually on the list. They also check for things like alcohol and beta blockers within competitions depending on the sport. And what this means is that, I don't know, if you want to smoke a joint to unwind, they're going to find it, and you're not going to be able to compete. And a lot of people, when I talk about the WDR code, when I talk about getting drug testing, they say, oh, I got nothing to hide. Go ahead, I'll do a test. Sure, I'll give you my pee. But do you honestly know what you're putting in your system at any given time? There's a lot of stories relating like this, but this is the best one that I can remember. Salt Lake City Olympics, 2002, Winter Games. There was a skier by the name of Alan Baxter, and he became the first Brit to win a medal in alpine skiing. celebrated at home. Everybody's like, yeah, this is cool. And I found an article, which I will link in the description, that is a conglomeration of the entire story, but it looks more like somebody's personal blog. But all the facts do check out. And I'm just going to read this directly. Back in the UK, Scott Allen Baxter used the British version of Vicks nasal inhalers. These chemicals use chemicals such as menthol, camphor, methyl salicylate, or wintergreen. I know I was going to screw some of this up. And they exert their effect through shrinking inflamed membranes. When the problem reoccurred in Salt Lake City, Baxter found that the team's doctor's original suggestion didn't work. When he saw a Vicks inhaler in a shop that appeared identical to the ones he used in the UK, he bought it. Sadly, although it looks the same, American Vicks contains compounds not found in the British version, including L-methamphetamine. L-methamphetamine is simply a decongestant and has no stimulant activity, but its optical isomer, D-methamphetamine, is the stimulant commonly known as speed. What happened to this guy was he finished third, and he had his medal stripped after failing a drug test because he tested positive for methamphetamines. Again, you might not think anything of, oh, well, you know, I'm just taking this thing. I know a lot of people take natural supplements. They take herbs. They take what they get at their local, I don't want to say any brand names for fear of getting in legal trouble, but I think you can kind of get the idea. And a lot of you guys don't understand what's in this stuff. The one thing that I get from the people at the World Anti-Doping Association is ignorance is not a defense. They can also test you at any time. They have something called a no advance notice test, where they just show up and, hey, you got to make produce a sample right here and now. And if you refuse, they will be polite, at least on paper, and tell you you're putting your Olympic career at risk. You ready for that? You're down at the field, you're hanging out with your buddies, and some guy in a white lab coat tells you, hey, need a piss test right now. Some of you might think you're ready, and a lot of you probably aren't. Right now, paintball does not test for any drugs at all. And I've heard stories of what some players will do themselves between games or before games. Thankfully, none of it is nearly as involved as what some of the Olympic guys tried to get away with, which I'm actually kind of grateful for, because that can kill you, man. But paintball doesn't do it. You can get drunk off your ass and take the field. What are they going to do? Now, this is a big point to me. Simply because adopting the WADA code would mean that paintball has grown up. Paintball is going to take that step and say, yeah, we're in the big leagues now. We're going to check our guys. We know that most of them are going to come up clean, but we're taking that big step. That's a huge deal to me. Because that's just sort of the, yeah, we're ready to grow up now. That's what it really comes down to for me. That's why it's really a sticking point for me, because this is something that they could do. They don't do it. I'll get to that a little bit later, though. Now, the final thing, and here's where things get a little bit sticky. They state that the sport must not rely on mechanical propulsion, such as a motor. Now, you might be wondering what this has to do with paintball, but a lot of you guys are probably just nodding your head, knowing pretty much what I'm about to talk about here. Now, if you go to the wiki page, the IOC wiki page, which I hate using the Wikipedia thing as a source, but at least I'm admitting I do. And if you look there, they list a lot of the sports that are recognized as IOC sports. Auto racing. Auto racing is a recognized sport by the IOC. Motorcycle racing. Air sports. I believe they also, what else do they do? What else is ineligible for this? Water skiing. It's recognized by the IOC. Water skiing. But it's not in the Olympics because all of them require a motor. Now, I will also admit this, that you're never going to see an Olympic snowboarder using the same kind of snowboard that I use on my small hill here in Wisconsin. So I understand that there is some wiggle room when it comes to things like technology in sports. But the thing is, if the technology is performing the act for the athlete, the IOC is really going to kind of sit back and go, oh, really now? Anytime they introduce a new piece of technology into a sport, it's rigorously tested to make sure that it's enhancing but not doing the work for the athlete. A good case point for this would be swimming. A couple of you guys might remember from 2008. Those one-piece swimsuits that those guys were wearing, and they were just shattering Olympic records, those were not normal bathing suits. Those were... what were they? They had they were basically, what it was doing, to make a long story short, was they were causing the swimmers to actually float higher in the water, which means less drag, which means they go faster. And I've got a couple stories that I had found. I'll link those in the descriptions down there. But they banned the suits in 2010, as far as FINA is concerned, the International Swimming Administration. They banned the suits in 2010. And almost all of the nations backed it. Because it was, as they were putting it, destroying the sport. Where if you didn't have this technology, you couldn't finish. You weren't on the podium. You weren't even in the finals. Now, how does this relate to paintball? A lot of you guys are probably just already, you know what I'm talking about, e-guns. Ramping. When you're talking about guns that do the shooting for you, essentially, the IOC is just going to get up and leave. They're not even going to look at what we're doing. Because they're just going to look at it as, oh, so you've got gear that shoots for you. Alright, come back to us when you actually have the athletes doing the work. Again, I'm going to grant you that a lot of the sports, the Olympic end gear is insanely high. I looked up what Olympic shooters use, just to give you an idea. And you'll never find that in anywhere outside of a shooting range. I'll put a link down to the Wired.com thing on it, but they put it best. Quote, these hot rod handguns tend to feature long, thin barrels for accuracy and low weight, and a strangely stripped down, almost steampunk look. They fire .22 caliber long rifle ammo in a pistol. So I understand that the Olympic standards are really flexible, and I also understand that you're not going to have the same gear in the Olympics that your average target shooter is going to be tinkering around with in the back 40. I get that. But I think the key phrasing may fall into when they say that the sport must not rely on mechanical propulsion. So, auto racing, you've got an engine, cars doing all the work. Paintball, the gun does most of the work for the player. Now, we can fix this. We can change this. And this is where we start getting into the this is never going to happen thing that I was mentioning at the beginning of the show. If we're really serious about making paintball an Olympic sport, there's a lot of things that we have to do. And I was kind of hinting at this earlier. The first thing that we need to do is we need to make an international rules committee. This is where we're going to fail. Because I have yet to see paintball really gel together and all collectively agree that this is a rule set that we all should use. This is the standards we all should adopt universally. Everybody thinks they have the answer. And we don't. Not one person. Every answer that's going to come out there is going to not please someone. So it just comes to the matter of, well, who do you make upset? Really is what it comes down to. So what we need to do is we need to drop the alphabet soup of names, honestly. We got to swallow some pride between each individual person. We have to sacrifice some of the things that you've dumped in just to make for the better good. And the players are going to have to do the same, not just the industry. Baseball. It used to be an Olympic sport. It was dropped. And it was a huge vote from the European side of things. And I'm going to quote a USA Today article. Baseball also suffers from its failure to reach an agreement with Major League Baseball that would send the top players to the Olympics. So essentially, one of the big reasons that baseball was dropped was because MLB didn't want to send their all-stars. So for paintball, what this would mean is that some of the top players would have to sacrifice some of their time to go play on the international level. That doesn't sound like much, but it's a big deal. It's just saying that the players have to be on board with this too. Everybody has to make their sacrifices. Which brings me actually to the second point. Everything has to be standardized. Everything. Now this is the part the players are probably not going to support, because it's going to require that shiny brand new e-gun that you got, that screaming rate of fire that you rely on, that really nice padded vest that you have, all that really nice padded clothing, gone. It's for the better good, guys. What we first need is we need a standard game format. Not necessarily a standard field layout, because there's a lot of sports in the Olympics that don't require a standardized field. Kayaking, believe it or not. But you need to standardize the format. It needs to be a 5, 7, or 10-man format. Doesn't matter, but it needs to be a global standard. Now, personally, I do not think that Capture the Flag or its variants are Olympic worthy, but I really should say that for its own video. If you guys want to hear that, I will be more than happy to put my opinion out for that. But for right now, let's just say that Capture the Flag is probably not the Olympic format. We also need to standardize the gear. And I look at RSX windsurfing. There's a windsurfing discipline in the Olympics. And they keep on in and out, in and out. But there's a standardized board, RSX, which is the Olympic board. The dimensions are standardized, the materials are standardized, the size is standardized, everything's the same. Excuse me. And they made the board specifically so that it could be ridden in a variety of conditions safely. And it's actually a really great case study on how a sport can standardize itself, even though it is pretty much a technology-driven sport. Now, if you go to rsxclass.com and you look at the About page, they have this great quote. The RSX is a one design with a strict set of class rules, which are written to ensure the sailors go sailing instead of modifying the equipment. The RSX class is based on finding the most skillful sailor and discourages those trying to find a way around the rules and give an advantage. Why can't we do this in paintball, guys? What's stopping us, other than pride? What I think we need to do is we need to create an Olympic paintball gear. We need to create an Olympic gun. I would recommend something mechanical, not electronic. It would have to have a standard barrel length, standard compressed air system, standard hopper, standard everything. You could probably work around body size as far as the internals go, but yeah, it's kind of getting a little sketchy on that end too. Everything would have to be standardized to what everybody's using, so that is now off the table. You no longer have a technological advantage, you're just down to the skill of the player. I also think there would have to be a standardized Olympic uniform. Standard fit, standard padding, which I would have to say would be minimal. You would have to remove the bounce factor. That has to go. Something like just knee and elbow padding, fine. You're crawling around on the ground, you're going to want something like that. But the moment you start adding more pads and more pads, then you start getting into problems, for lack of a better way to put it. And again, this goes back to the idea of my idea of what would be a good standard, but not this video, not this time. The idea of this is to create a level play field on the technological standpoint. Again, so that paintball players can just play, not have to go buy better gear than everybody else, or at least feel like they have to buy better gear than everybody else. I do have a format in mind, but just briefly. The current system, I believe, needs to be scrapped. Again, Capture the Flag is just not going to work on the world stage. Now, some are going to argue that going highest to the high. I'm going to argue that now. If you're going out and buying the highest end gear and saying, well, yeah, this is a standard, then that's not the point. It's an arms race. You get the problem with the 2008 swimsuits. You either have the high end gear or you lose. Why not just go, okay, here is the cap of the gear, play to your top level with this gear. Again, I don't think the players are going to do this because it would mean sacrificing that screaming rate of fire that they like so much. Well, I like shooting a case of paint a game. That's nice. I don't want to get into that here. I really don't. Now, third, we would have to embrace the WADA code. Many, many years ago, I made an April Fool's gag post on one forum that I was on, and it was a couple line post, and it was saying that NPPL Dallas is going to be having random drug testing as part of the league. If you do not, if you don't take part in the random drug testing, your team will not be allowed to compete. And I hadn't heard much of it, except for like about 3 or 4 years later, while working on the Paintball book, actually. I mentioned this to somebody who I was on the book with, and she just kind of like, her face turned all white, and she said, "That was you?" Apparently, a lot of the pro teams were calling up her business because the bosses that she worked for were running NPPL that year and that event, and they were screaming into the phone, "How did you, if you'd have random drug testing, we're not coming, and we're going to pull our sponsorship." And they had no idea what the hell was going on. So what I'm getting at is that I don't think pro teams want this. I don't think they want to embrace this. I will grant that possibly it could be the, why did you just bring this on us at the last second, but I'm more thinking that it would mean the party's over. You know, you'd have to detox. And a lot of guys don't want to do that. Paintball's about having a weekend party, right? You get out to the field, you do your 5 games on Saturday, you do your 3 games on Sunday. Weekend party. No. We're here for a sport, guys. That's the idea. When I think really comes down to when players say they have nothing to hide, but when it comes to push comes to shove, they got something to hide, or they're afraid of what they might see in there. Now, this also includes the International Committee stating what substances are absolutely banned from competitions, and not being afraid to tell players, no, you can't play. That's it. You broke the code. You're out. We are banning you for X amount of months. Paintball has a long, long history of not banning players for doing stupid things. We need to change that. That needs to, you got to have teeth. If you're going to have rules, they got to stick. Now, fourth, we got to change the attitude. And this is another one that won't happen because players want to be badasses. And the industry, they're more than happy to make their small pittance of money if it means that they get all of it. Any sport that's excited to be mentioned in a sitcom or on a movie is not ready for the big leagues. Opinions. The industry has to stop focusing on the flavor of the month and start focusing on the long haul. Instead of just looking at what are we going to debut at the next tournament, they have to be looking at where can we get more players in 20 years. Paintball has proven it has staying power. It's been around since 1981. It's still here. Even through economic recession, we're still playing paintball. Stop looking at just next week and start thinking about 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years from now. Now, the existing leagues, they need to drop the attitude. Drop the attitude of taking over. Stop thrusting the game in people's faces. A lot of these big events, they put paintball into these locations where people have to look at the game. I'm looking right at you, Callie. I'm looking at the games on the beach. I'm looking at the Strip at Vegas. If you're running a good game, people will come and find you. You don't have to thrust it down their throats. Run a good show, people will come and watch it. They also need to crack down on cheaters and poor attitudes, and I also believe they need to make it stick. They need to actually have fines. They need to have long-term bans for people who routinely break rules. I'm just saying. Fine a player a couple $1,000. Let's see how long that goes. The biggest one also, I think, is the players. One thing that I see from a lot of players is they think that they are bigger than the game, and you are not. You're replaceable. Get over it. Right now, paintball's a boys' club. We need to get out of that mentality. We need to not have the attitude of no chicks allowed. That's just what has to happen. We need to get women into the sport if you want to have it taken seriously at the Olympic level. The last thing that really needs to happen, the fifth thing, it's all or nothing. Everyone needs to be on board with this. If the entire sport does not commit to having paintball in the Olympics, it fails. Period. It's happened time and time again, where people come out with this grand new format, and it launches with a big splash, and then crashes and burns because there's no support for it. We need to have the support. We need to have the entire industry behind it and believing in it. Not just lip service, actually believing in it. So a lot of this comes back to you guys who are listening to this show right now. Answer down in the comment section below. Answer on Facebook. Make a response video. Is this something you want? And I mean really want it. Not just, yeah, it would be cool. Is it something that you're willing to put up and sacrifice for? Is it something that you want to see happen, that you're willing to make changes for? Personally, I want it. And not just, hey, that'd be neat. I'm more thinking it'll make large companies like Nike look into paintball and make awesomer gear for us. Imagine being able to go into Sports Authority and buying all your paintball gear right there. Imagine being able to find your favorite paintball team's gear in Sports Authority. That would be pretty awesome, I think. Right now you don't see that because we're just a small little niche that's never grown up. Now I'm going to end with one concept here. If you guys haven't been aware of this, BMX, it's a relatively new sport in the Olympics. It made its debut last Olympics, as in 2008. And what got me, in 2008, every interview I saw with the riders was just this level of humility. They were grateful for what they were given. It wasn't just the, wow, we're in the Olympics. It was, wow, this is really cool. We made it. And they spent many, many years trying to get to that level. And when they finally got there and saw the payoff, they were grateful to have it. They were grateful to have done it. It wasn't just another comp. They had pride because they were riding for their country. I'd like to see paintball mature enough to be grateful for something like that. So thank you guys very much for listening. If you guys want to hear more of this stuff, comment down below. If you guys want to hear some thoughts about standardizing the game, I'll make that its own show. But thanks for listening once again, and I will see you guys the next time.